โอเคไหนดูสิโอเคเปิดเสียงเกนชินเรียบร้อย
first ep
เริ่มเปลี่ยนซีนลืมไปโอเค เปลี่ยนเรียบร้อยแล้ว
Welcome everyone to the first episode of the Adeptus Ridiculous. I'm DK, and I know literally nothing about Warhammer lore. I know a few little bits and scattered pieces, but by and large, I'm an ignorant baby child. So, this podcast is going to be about me learning about Warhammer lore from an expert, Bricky. Hello, Bricky.
Hello. Expert, not quite. Very well versed in the lore, somewhat, yeah. Now, saying that you know absolutely nothing about Warhammer lore, and I myself can say that I know a pretty decent amount of Warhammer lore, but my job here is not necessarily to be the one and all person for your Warhammer information. It's so I can tell you, hey, look at this stupid thing, and you can be like, why is that thing so stupid? And I can be like, because it's Warhammer.
Fair enough, and there's so many crazy things about Warhammer, like the bits and pieces I know are just insanity. It's a crazy world, and I need help.
I can certainly provide help, because even though everything is as ridiculous as it is, naturally that is the charm. If you go out and you watch yourself like a Mad Max Fury Road, right? And then you look at the world and you got that dude with the guitar firing flames out of it, and then you remember that the whole world is running out of gasoline, but he's firing flames out of his guitar, and you're like, you know, that doesn't make much sense, but that's not the point, because you like the flame guitar guy. Warhammer is the flame guitar guy. It is the perfect example, and that is exactly what I'm actually going to be trying to share with you the most we can. And in each episode, we'll be having our own different topic on a different part of the Warhammer world. Sometimes it'll be a faction or a race. Sometimes it'll be something a little bit more specific, like an army or perhaps a character. And sometimes it can be something a little bit more, I probably like a little bit more of an overview. Things like maybe the warp, or we could talk about like how the galaxy is structured. Lots of different options, lots of different things, lots of different books, and lots of lore to be covered. And it's gonna be I'm excited for today.
Ride. Yeah.
We're batting out like really quickly. We're coming in hard. We're going on one of the we're coming in super hot. We're going with one of the most popular topics out right now. So we're starting strong. I'm excited.
And it should be noted that I have no previous knowledge about what today's topic is. So I am going in with no preconceived notions. I have no idea what's going on. The only thing I have been told by Bricky was this is like the most depressing faction in Warhammer. And that is that's a lot to take in as far as Warhammer is concerned.
I mean, Warhammer is the Depression Olympics, so the fact that these guys are running home with the gold is pretty great.
That's impressive. I'm really excited to find out what the most depressing faction in Warhammer is.
So, for the first episode's topic, we are hopping into a fan favorite, the Deathcore of Krieg. And I'm always having difficulty with this because it is spelled K-O-R-P-S, and I'm always terrible as if it's core or corpse. That being said, I'm imagining it's core because we have core in a real military, but at the same time, calling it the Death Corpse of Krieg is very accurate to the lore, because
that
these
seems
people
super fitting for Warhammer. Yeah.
They're so fitting. So the Death Corps of Krieg, I'm gonna call them Corps of Krieg because it works out easier for me.
Okay. Whatever works best.
The Death Corps of Krieg is an Imperial Guard regiment. You're familiar with the Imperial Guard, I assume.
Familiar, yes. Versed, no.
Okay, so in the Imperial Guard, it is the untold billions of men and women that fight as the hammer of the Emperor, the basic shock troops. And that's the kind of like the regular old 6-foot tall guy, no genetic enhancements. He's given a laser gun that can blow off limbs called the las gun, which is the worst weapon in Warhammer because, you know, we got some power creep in this world. And he runs out with some pretty good modern day body armor, which of course turns into paper in the Warhammer universe. And he is just out to go kill the enemy. The thing about guardsmen is that when you fight orcs and Tyranids, you always think about their size, like not their actual physical size, but just the sheer amount of them. Guardsmen are the human equivalent. Most guardsmen raids legitimately involve millions upon millions of men.
Ooh. That's a lot of dudes.
It's a lot of dudes.
I guess if you have to go and fight like orcs and Tyranids, you need a massive army because orcs and Tyranids are like never ending. They're always popping.
ไอ้นั่นคนดูหนึ่งคนหรือว่าเป็น
looks at an orc and says,
เป็น
"There's one, there's 100."
ตัวเราที่
Says
อะไร
the
อะ
fucking guardsman.
ไป
Excuse me.
It's the
ไปดู
exact
เมื่อกี้
same thing,
ไปดู
man.
ใน
It's
ช่อง
like, do you have no
ช anel มาเมื่อกี้
self-awareness? So guardsmen in their own right are the standard troops, and they just come in a sea of men. They just never-endingly, and the whole point, to an extent, sometimes you would go and charge like a space marine to try to beat him with fisticuffs. And this is the Imperium. They're so devout. Of course, they're gonna punch that space marine to death, because the one who does it is absolutely the most steel-balled man of all time. You know that quote? Fear the old in a profession where they die young or something like that. Where men die young. That is basically a lot of the guardsmen. They have a 90% mortality rate on their first mission.
Jesus.
So if you get veteran guardsmen, they're like the most brass nuts men of all time.
You gotta be, right? With that many, so many of them are gonna die in the first mission, and if you're long lasting in that scene,
no, if you can survive your guardsman deployments, you are an absolute monster. So this is the Death Corps of Krieg. They're a particular regiment. So you can have regiments from different worlds because each world has their own like production of guardsmen. They have the Imperial Tithe, where, you know, like a tithe in real life, you have to pay resources, food, whatever. For them, it's a lot of times soldiers. So I'm sure you're familiar with Cadia. I think we've talked about Cadia a few times.
Cadia doesn't sound familiar.
You disgust me. So Cadia.
กิจกรรมใหม่
So Cadia is a really important world in Warhammer. It recently got blown up, but a lot of the guardsmen, the more standard ones, come from Cadia. There's the Catachim, which are like, they all look like Rambo. They're on a jungle planet. They have giant knives and they're all like shirtless.
Okay.
It's very silly. There's a wonderful character. We'll talk about him in a different podcast that got half of his body bitten off. And while the medics was stitching him back up, he was chucking grenades with his good hand.
Holy shit!
Because nobody cares. You've got like the Vostroyan Firstborn, which are kind of more of like a steampunk Russian vibe, and yada yada. The Death Corps are a World War I like Kaiser German vibe. So the history of the Death Corps is that they were on a wonderful world, a very nice world, Hive City, or not Hive City, but a Hive planet. Think of it like LA, but 17 times as tall and 17 times as wide. That's what a Hive City is, and the whole world is that way.
Oh God, I've lived in LA. Oh man, that's a lot of pollution.
Yep, it's a lot of pollution. It's a lot of population.
A lot of assholes too.
And LA sucks.
LA sucks, man.
So they live on this world of Krieg. And on Krieg, they were basically, they had their usual kind of deal. They had lots of guardsmen that were being exported and, you know, resources and stuff. They were like any normal world, kind of shrouded in some mystery and stuff because the events of Krieg took place around 1500 to 2000 years ago. Now, with Krieg, as it went through its paces, there was a oligarchy that was the main ruling class, a council of, oh God, I've always had a hard time pronouncing this. It's not autocrats, right?
I mean, that sounds right to me.
Is that right?
Autocratic? Yeah, that sounds right.
I hate the English language.
You're a genius, man. You nailed it.
Thank you, Warhammer. You're teaching me.
Finally. Well, I'm not the only one learning here now. See?
Oh hell yeah! This is for both of us.
So
Sweet.
reading Rainbow.
So anyway, the ruling oligarchy for Krieg it was basically like they were kind of dicks, as most politicians tend to be, and
We're not
เดี๋ยว
getting
นะ
that.
สักครู่ตอนนี้ไมอนคุยอะไรเนี่ย เดี๋ยวเปิดเสียง Google Chrome ก่อนแล้วก็สลับเดี๋ยวนะจะต้องตรงนี้เดี๋ยวนะอันนี้ได้อยู่มั้งโอเคตอนนี้ทำกิจกรรมอันนี้อยู่ต่อหน้าเฟซโอเคมันนั่นสินะแต่ถ้าการผจญภัยไม่มีโซลูชันแข่งมันจะเกิดขาดอะไรไปอย่างเพื่อนฐานที่ผมเหมือนจะเป็นทะเลที่มันค่อยสงบโอเคเลี้ยวซ้ายนี่คือยังไงได้รับชิ้นส่วนข้อมูลภาพมันภาพตั้งเรือไปยังเมฆน้อยเมฆมากเลี้ยวซ้ายแล้วกันโอเคทำงานหมดแชร์กิจกรรมปิดไปชมผลงานแฟนอาร์ตเช็คอินก่อนใน EP 5 หน่วยเอาแค่นี้ก็เอาโอเคคือยังไงเราต้องไปให้อะไรสุดไอ้นั่นเหรอปลดล็อกพื้นที่8 แห่งได้รับไพโมเจมวัดโอเคเป็นกิจกรรมล่องเรือแล้วก็คู่มือการเดินเรือคือแบบอะไรเนี่ยมีความหยุดเต็มไปหมดสิ่งที่ไม่ควรพลาดมาซากุระโอยจากประวัตินิรันดร์ได้มา2แล้วป้องกันเดินเรือสรุปก็คือยังไงเดี๋ยวนะโอเคเลื่อนได้ยังไม่ปลดล็อกพื้นที่ทั้งหมดก็คือประมาณว่าเราต้องเดินเก็บรูทไปใช่ไหมเนี่ยเหมือนจะไอ้นี่เป็นอะไรฮะเดี๋ยวต้องจัดการอะไรที่ครบก่อนสักประมาณถ้าเกิด150จะได้ไหมใช่120 110 100โอเคประมาณครบไปประมาณ100น่าจะโอเคอยู่นี่700โอเคกลับไปพื้นที่เริ่มต้นตอนนี้เราไปทางไหนมาบ้างแล้วนะอันนี้ไงสำเร็จแล้วมุ่งตรงไปได้รับข้อมูลภาพนิยายประหลาดที่ขาดลงเรื่องเล่มหนึ่งเกี่ยวกับปีศาจเทโนกิที่แปลงร่างเป็นมนุษย์และมันจุดวัดมีอะไรขวางอยู่ไม่ได้ขวางอยู่เลยต้องอ้อมไปอย่างเดียว ไปทางโขดหินเยอะหรือโขดหินน้อยขวาแม่ง ถ้าเดินทางอย่ามองเราไปใต้น้ำเจอฝูงปลาอีกแล้วครั้งนี้มาทำอะไรแบ็คซีฟิสตูแต่แค่มีแต่พวกโขดหินหลากหลายระดับได้มีพืชน้ำขนาดใหญ่ด้วยคือลูกเขาน่ากลัวอยู่หน่อยๆลดความเร็วลงหรือจากชิ้นส่วนข้อมูลภาพดูเหมือนว่าจะถูกจีออกมาจากสมุดบันทึกของนักผจญภัยมีภาวะของกิ่งไม้ที่มีสายฟ้าโอเคพายุเก็บไปเรือลมแรงเดี๋ยวโอเคคือแบบเล่นโอซูเลยคือกดรัวได้ใช่ไหมสิ่งของที่หายไปไม่มีโอเคต่อไปโอเคโขดหินไปโขดหินน้อยจะรับชิ้นส่วนโอเคทางทีมจะเลยสมมติเป็นช็อตเดียวกันนะเธอไว้ทีมเก่งด้านไหนกำลังชมรักษาการเล่นเรือบนทะเลมีอันตรายอยู่เต็มไปหมดแต่เราก็ยังเล่นได้อย่างอิสระท่ามกลางโขดหินสุดยอดเลยชมเกินไปแล้วยังไม่ใช่เวลาที่จะมาลดความระมัดระวังลงโอเคตอนวันนี้ก็นับว่าหมดแล้วมั้งสิ่งของที่หายไปมีสิ่งของที่หายไปงั้นเหรอแล้วก็อะไรเนี่ยซากุระต้นนี้มีอะไรมีจิวัดอันนี้น่าจะเป็นด้านหลังนี่น่าจะบอกว่าเป็นจิตวิญญาณมีจิตวิญญาณมั้งเดี๋ยวลองเปลี่ยนภาษาก่อนถ้าเป็นภาษาอังกฤษHistory Voyage Nautical Manual นี่ใช่ไหมเนี่ยอันนี้ใช่ไหม This Sakura Head มันก็ เหมือนกันเลยคำมันขาดโอเคเปลี่ยนกลับเป็นภาษาไทยเหมือนเดิมโอเคตอนนี้อะไรโอเคตอนนี้มาดูว่าตรงไหนยังไม่เคลียร์เดี๋ยวต้องกลับไปพื้นที่แรกก่อนอันนี้เตือนภัยเหลือเราต้องเลี้ยวขวาลมแรงจะเหลือออกไปทั้งเส้นทางแล้วปืนตัวปลายยังบวกปืนอยู่โอเคพลังงานไม่เพียงพอมาตรงนี้ปึ๊บตรงนี้แถวนี้หมดละเหลือตรงนี้แล้วก็มีตรงนี้ที่หนึ่งที่ต้องอะไรตรงนี้น่าจะมีต่อไปทางไม่ทางนี้อะไรเราเลี้ยวมาทางนี้ก่อนใช่ไหมแล้วก็เจอนี้เราเลี้ยวมาทางนี้แล้วน่าจะต่อนี่ทางนี้แล้วก็มีน้ำวนอยู่ตรงนี้ด้วยอันนี้คือประมาณว่าแบบเหมือนจำลองว่าเราอะไรเดินทางไปอินาซึมะใช่ไหมเนี่ยให้เดานะปลดล็อกแล้ว12มันพลังงานมันเท่าไหร่นะในอีกมัน มันหน่วยเท่าไหร่อ่ะหน่วย5 นาทีหรือว่าหน่วยน่าจะ5 ชั่วโมง5 ชั่วโมง 38น่าจะรีทุกๆ6 ชั่วโมงประมาณนั้นโอเคกลับหน้าหลักกลับเข้าเกมต่อส่วนอันนี้ก็ดนตรีปิดเสียงไปก่อนโอเคเดี๋ยวนะเสียงของโครมนี่ปิดเรียบร้อยเสร็จปุ๊บก็ฟังไอ้นี่ต่อเฮ้ยลืมนี่เก็บเคลมจดหมายก่อนอะไรเนี่ยเปิดคู่มือ ตั้งแต่เท่าไหร่13 ถึง 20ใช่เพราะวันที่20นี่ไม่ใช่21มั้งวันที่20กว่าเนี่ยเท่าที่จำได้เหมือนจะอัปเดตของอะไรอินาซึมะใช่ไหมโอเคประกาศแนวเว็บลอยแล้วล่องท่องเกี่ยวคืนนะฮะโอเคฟัง
No, we don't have to do
ฟัง
that.
พอแคสต่อ
They became really insular and very paranoid of the outside threat because they had so much power and almost a dictatorship, pretty much a dictatorship in that oligarchy. So they put so many resources to strengthening these big cities, and they had their own private armies, and they surrounded their world with a ton of defenses, like what Tony Stark wanted to do, and he wanted to make a ring of steel around the earth, that kind of shit. And they were starting to get really angry with the Imperial Administratum because they had to go ahead and take the tithe of troops and stuff, and they were like, "How dare you ask us for things from our world? How dare you tax our tea, you son of a bitch?"
Oh, we all know how that works.
Yes, we know exactly what happens after
we
that,
Americans
don't we?
know exactly what happens after that one.
So after the British kept taxing their hive cities, basically they were really angry. And after enough time, the planetary governor, whose name has been purged from all imperial records because of how hated he is, declared planet-wide martial law, and they are now independent of the Imperium of Man, and he renounced the Emperor of Mankind.
That seems, again, don't know a whole lot, but I know that's usually that's a big deal. That's you're reaching that heresy level, right? And
that is absolutely heresy level.
Yeah, I guess that's heresy beyond heresy, if you can imagine such a thing. And that's, oh boy, I can't imagine that goes over super well.
No, so immediately it was plunged into civil war, because of course it was.
Of course, why not?
And so the civil war was between the planetary governor and all of his citizens and a private army he amassed versus the currently loyal imperialist Kree. And as they were going through, the rebels died pretty fast. The rebels, as in the imperial ones, the heretics, were really fucking low. Yeah. And it got incredibly painful to the point where they were stuck into only a singular hive city and they were holding out. But then came a man. His name was Colonel, and I apologize, but it's like Jhin. It's Jurten, but the Krieg have like a German vibe, so I can't tell if it's like a German
Maybe it's like
way
a Jurten?
Jurten? Maybe something like that. Yeah, we'll go with that. Good old Yurti.
Good old Yurti, yeah.
Colonel Yurti. So Colonel Yurti was the last main ruler of those Imperials, the ones that stayed faithful to the Emperor. And so, considering that he was stuck in this singular area and he was holding out the whole time, eventually, after asking for reinforcements from the Imperium, they realized because all those defenses they made, it would take a full-scale planetary assault to get through it, and the Imperium was basically like, yeah, it's not worth it, dude, you're on your own. Good luck.
As you're like, yeah, he's on his own, all those defenses failed, I was like, oh, there's no way he's getting reinforcements. Like, there's no way that they're gonna be like, oh yeah, we'll send this gigantic fleet in, and yeah, sure, we'll help you. It's like, nope, we'll just lose this one guy. It's fine, we'll make more.
They're too busy anyway. Imperial's got shit to do, like putting people to the stake. So, continuing there.
Busybody work, man. That's stake putting.
they love burning wishes. They're down for it. So basically, at the end of the day, he said to himself, very simply, if the Emperor would not have the planet, then nobody will. So he began what was known as the Purging. Good old Colonel Yurdi found a nice hidden Mechanicus secret. You know the Mechanicus, right? The creepy techno people?
Yeah, I love their aesthetic. I want to paint some of them. One of the few ones I actually want to paint because they look so damn cool with all their crazy spider arms and servo skulls and shit.
I mean, techno monks is a pretty awesome concept.
Oh, yeah. And I hear it's totally canon that they fuck toasters.
Oh, totally canon.
Yeah,
There's no way that's not true.
Yeah.
So what happened was that in a nice secret Mechanicus vault underneath the cities, because there was already a ton of underground cities, he and his friend, another one of the Majos, went down to go into this very fancy Mechanicus vault, and what was there? A bunch of nukes. And I mean a bunch of nukes. Like a lot. And so good old Yurdi was like, if I can't have the planet, nobody will. So he fired over and over again as all the traders watched silos open up across the planet and nuclear missiles fly into the air and detonate in the planet's stratosphere, completely carpeting it in radioactive isotopes and fallout.
Oh my god. That's crazy. I mean, I guess if the Imperium isn't going to send you reinforcements and you're going to die anyway, and you know that there's a secret cache of nukes, why not take all of these fucking traders with you? Sure.
This man just fallouted his whole planet.
Jesus Christ.
So for days upon days, it was engulfed in this just giant blanket of nuclear fire. And then they already had like a kind of tainted ecosystem that collapsed. Billions of people died either from the fires, the radioactive radiation poisoning, or the nuclear winter that then followed. And basically, after Yurdi's purging occurred, everybody else had to chill in bunkers underneath the surface. Now, I got a question for you. I got an ABC question for you.
All right, about the Yurdi Purgy?
About the Yurdi Purgy. About the Yurdi Purgy. So, after Colonel Yurdi's Purgy, what happened next? 1, they continued to murder each other for more years. 2, there were literally no heretics left. Or 3, the entire planet eventually succumbed to their wounds and died.
I have to look, knowing it's got to be the first one. I can't imagine even setting off, I'm assuming hundreds of, maybe thousands of nukes. Even that wouldn't stop these assholes from killing each other as like radioactive zombies or something. I'm going with A. I'm going with 1.
A is correct. They continued to murder each other for 500 years.
500 years?
The Krieg Civil War was a 500-year war.
How did they keep fighting after all those nukes? And like, if they already had a fucked up ecosystem, the nukes go off, it's totally collapsed. How many billions of people died from like the fallout and the nuke winter? How did they continue for 500 years?
The entire planet turned into a stalemate where the entire surface was barely hospitable. Actually, it was inhospitable without gas masks and protective equipment. And they dug trenches across almost every inch of the surface to engage in trench warfare and sieging and stalemates for 500 years until eventually, after enough time, the loyalist emperor loving Kriegsmen, with all of their trenches, all of their gas masks, and their shovels, eventually came out victorious.
Wow, that is a battle and a half.
It is.
Did the Imperium ever like be like, oh hey, so we noticed you made a little progress. Now that their things are a little maybe we'll send some reinforcements, or was it just like, nah, it's fuck it, we're just gonna stalemate this planet and whatever?
Oh no, they told them to go fuck yourselves and try your best. Because at that point, once the planet was nuclearly bombed into oblivion, they thought to themselves, there's literally no point in salvaging this. This is a waste of resources. This whole planet is fucked.
That's true, because even if you do send reinforcements and conquer it, what are you conquering? A barren radioactive wasteland that you can't use
คุณ
anyway?
ภาพโลกของ
Exactly.
ต้องการเพิ่มขึ้น
Meh. So basically, after the 500 years of fighting, and so now Kriegsmen have a nice reputation both in the community as well as in lore to be these gas mask wearing, they got the Kaiser helmets, and they love digging trenches, and they love hitting people with trench shovels. That's one of their favorite melee weapons. It's a good old shovel, and so. Yeah, so naturally, it's very World War I, obviously, very World War I, very German. So they're extremely popular for that aesthetic, and it's also kind of cool because they don't have their own faces because they're always gas masked. You can never tell what any of them look like, so they have just kind of this like face of death constantly going on. They like to ride on horses quite often, creepy mutated horses that also wear gas masks.
No, wait, don't, please, I need a picture of a horse wearing a gas mask.
All right,
immediately.
I got
because
this.
like that's, and of course
เดี๋
the
ยวนะ
mutant, what do they have,
โลกป้อง
like
กันนี่มัน
6
นับ
legs?
Not 6 legs, but
นับ
their
ของ
legs
ดิโอ
in
นาไหม
particular
ดิโอนามัน
are
นับเป็นโลกป้องกันไหมวะ
Oh god, yeah, they are fucked up. Oh god,
Yeah.
those, yeah, okay, yep. I thought it was going with the
They got below.
stereotypical, like, it had 3 sets of 2, two sets of front and one set in the back, but that is, boy. Yeah, I could see why if you were like a historian or a World War buff or whatever, this would be the faction that you would totally
จาก
grab.
GO โอเค
They love
With the trench warfare, the gas mask and everything, yeah, that I totally get that.
So, continuing from this entire just massive war, now Krieg is a death world. There are classifications of worlds. A lot of them are known as death worlds. And like, for instance, I'm to mention the Katachin Rambo boys. They live on a death world because every single animal on that world and plant is carnivorous.
Oh.
We'll talk about them later. Some other podcast episode. But so Kriegsmen now, after this insane amount of heresy, but warfare, the Department of Ministorum said, okay, you guys owe us now. Due to your heresy, you now owe us, the Imperium, a tithe of soldiers. And to their shock, Krieg did not provide 1 or 2, but 20 regiments of men immediately, and they asked for the most inhospitable warfare zones possible. They requested it.
Wow. Okay.
So, the thing with Krieg now is they hate themselves. They deem themselves as unworthy to the Emperor's light, and due to their heresy, they have a never-ending feeling of this guilt for what they did as a people. So they have such a requirement to serve the Emperor to an almost suicidal note. There's a great, not only joke, but legitimate lore thing where, do you know the Commissar? He's the guy who shoots you if you run away. So Death Corps Commissars have the interesting duty to make sure that the Death Corps don't run in too much. Because if everyone else runs away, they blast them in the face. But when it comes to Death Corps, they're like, guys, stop. Stop, back up,
you
back
can't
up.
immediately die, guys. You gotta rein this shit in. We're trying to win this fight.
The Krieg motto is, and I quote, it's the final litany of the Litany of Sacrifice, recited by a Krieg guardsman when entering the battle. It is, quote, in life, war, in death, peace, in life, shame, in death, atonement. So they're just like, I can't wait to die.
I am sure. Jesus Christ, that's crazy. So I'm assuming they get sent on like the almost nigh unwinnable like whatever missions where they gotta go to like crazy carnivorous plant hybrid worlds or whatever.
Quite often, yes. They particularly request the most hazardous war zones available. Often, they'll have many times where certain guardsmen regiments just cannot get through due to horrible volcanic activity, the way the sun blasts the planet, a tidally locked planet, for instance, where the sun part is so hazardous that it's impossible to get people across there. Horrible jungles and acid areas. They live in a nuclear scorched wasteland. To them, this is like Tuesday. So
that's like paradise. That's like a vacation.
They're stoked. So they always choose the worst zones, and they have become very efficient. They only have one real problem. They bring down morale for everyone else around them.
Because they're good.
Well, no, not that they're too good. They're too sad.
Oh, well, I guess that's...
You know, like gallows humor? You know, like bring everyone down a little bit?
I thought, genuinely, when you said that, I was like, oh, it's because they've been on so many crazy missions. They request the hardest stuff, so if they're still here, oh, man, my morale's super low because, yeah, well, look at them go crazy. But yeah, they're so fucking sad.
No, they can't wait to die. They're stoked to die. They're suicidal. So you go to everywhere else and they're like, I don't want to work with these people. They're creepy.
Fair enough.
So, and interestingly enough, when it comes down to the Death Corps and how they get their troops, now their #1 export of their planet, the tide for the Imperium, is indeed guardsmen. Never-ending amounts of guardsmen, and in fact, they're producing quite a few, a little too quickly. They are kind of curious that there might be a problem, and they might be having some not perfectly moral, well, I say moral in the Imperium, but moral means of rebirth and birthing. That's a whole other topic. We don't need to talk about that. But let's just imagine that they're popping out soldiers a little too quickly. A little too quick. That being said, they have a massive amount of guardsmen coming from their planet. They have other things, like they have a couple of eugenics policies, but that's more to get rid of mutations from their horrible landscape. But often we can be deployed into areas that are horrendously horrible, and therefore allow the Imperium to not have to use any of their penal legion troops or even space marines, because space marines, while you see them a lot, are actually a very rare sight on the battlefield. They only come if you really need someone to get something done. So for that time being, there is really no faction as down to run head first and to experience death as the Death Corps. They are a not only radiation-stricken planet, but they are a depressing faction that are always stoked to die, build trenches, whack you with a shovel, especially the whacking with the shovel part. They love their shovels.
Those trenches, they love digging a good trench.
And they love hitting you with one. There's a great image. I love it. And it's these two Tau. It's a Tau guy and his kid. And the dad checks under the kid's bed for monsters, and there's a bunch of Kriegsmen with shovels down there crawling out. It's wonderful.
I assume when they go on other wars, they're still just digging trenches wherever they go as well, right? That's still their main source of, like, you know, combat tactics, right? Just digging trenches even in like a fucking volcano.
Well, they're masters of the siege, and they're masters of, like, attrition. So that actually is a great point, because it gets me to a wonderful war that me and Shai were looking at earlier. So I'm going to read this verbatim from the wiki, all right? Castigation of Durandus. The main issue with this world, the putting part of this battle, is simply their nature of how the Krieg commit murder. So, the Hive World of Durandus withheld its annual tithes, which of course, guardsmen, food, etc. Regiments of Krieg's Death Corps were deployed to act as the honor guard of the Departamento Minatorum investigation team. After the Imperial officials were hanged by the rebellious populace, the Krieg troops redeployed into the towering mountains that overlooked the primary hive city. Several artillery and siege companies began to bombard the city spires, and the inhabitants were mercilessly gunned down as they tried to break out of the besieged city. After 10 years of relentless artillery shelling, the hive city was reduced to nothing but rubble and dust. 2 years after all signs of life had already ceased, and 5 years after the hive had issued an unconditional surrender.
Oh boy.
So they're like, we give up, we all give up, and they bomb them for 5 more years. And it's like, sir, there is literally not any signs of life. 2 more years.
2 more years of bombing. Jesus. That's literally one of the most Warhammer things I've ever heard. They've
so
given
funny.
up. We've won. Yeah, but look, there's still buildings down there, man. You keep fucking them up. That's the most Warhammer thing ever.
It's so silly. They're such an over-the-top in a world of over-the-top people. They tend to have a lot of rather interesting different kinds of troops as well. Like they have horses, there's like grenadier shock troops and stuff. That being said, ironically, the Death Corps recruitment and training for someone who wants to die so quickly, they spend a lot of time training. They're trained from crib to grave, crib to coffin. As soon as they're born, they are in full training. And kind of a funny thing is that since the Kriegsmen are so interested in dying, there's always a slight issue that the guardsmen themselves are not quite of age. And so a lot of times 14 to 16-year-old kids will join the guardsmen regiments, but you can't tell because they have their masks on.
Right, and all that armor.
Yeah, so you have no idea that this is a 16-year-old kid that's about to duke it out with Gazkul Thraka, orc war boss.
How in the hell do you train a Kriegsman at from? You said it was like crib to grave. How the hell you training a Kriegsman baby?
I'm assuming you replace their bottle with a shovel and their pacifier with a pin of a grenade. And you just move it from there.
There's a fan art I need to see manifest.
a little Krieg baby. He's in diapers. He's got like a gas mask on with a shovel in one hand and a grenade pin in the other.
He doesn't get a bottle and a pacifier. No.
Oh, and he's got to be in like a little hole because he dug himself a trench.
He dug himself a trench. That's the crib. They don't get a crib. They just get a little baby trench in the floor.
You know, ironically, that's probably what might happen because they all live underground now because of the damn nuclear radiation.
Oh, that's true. That might actually happen. They might just dig him a little hole, and that's just your warm hole that you sleep in.
It's kind of like
you really start off in the depression as a baby, just into the hole.
you come out of the womb and you're like, I want to die.
It's your first thought is, man, can I just end it?
Can I be done? I want, but it has to be in the Emperor's service.
No,
you can't just die.
No.
It has to be in the Emperor's service.
You have to die in the Emperor's service, not just a pitiful, meaningless thing. You gotta find that redemption, right?
Yes.
For what your people did.
It's particularly for atonement, of course. Right. Moving on though, Kriegsmen in particular, I want to grab a couple of quotes that I found over here on the 40k lexicon. So we got a couple guard quotes.
These guys have got to be they've got to be the life of the party as far as quotes are concerned.
There's a couple particularly good quotes. It depends on exactly what kind of type of person you're talking to. For instance, there's always some humorous ones where they're like the Catachin, right? The guys on the jungle planet. Mm-hmm. They always joke about how half my men have been eaten by the wildlife. I got like itching in my ass that is killing me. Both of my boots have been pulled off due to like a radioactive muck. God damn it, Emperor! I love this place. It's just like home. You get a lot of stuff like that. As for the Kriegsmen, there's a couple quotes here, only a few, but you got wonderful Lieutenant Konarski, 933rd Death Corps Regiment. His quote is, and I quote, "We are the Death Corps of Kriegsum, Just think that was just a pretty name. We never retreat, we fight, and we die. That is the Krieg way. Pretty, no, kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a nice sort of standard way to describe. Yeah. That's a good little describer of them, sure.
It's a solid one. Then we also have this one from good old Colonel German name. Can't pronounce that shit. It says, your foe is well-equipped, well-trained, battle-hardened. He believes his gods are on his side. Let him believe that he will. We have tanks on ours.
Another solid quote, another great quote to describe the Krieg.
And this is the last one, and this is a pretty good one. Says, quote, nah, soon as you're old enough, you're sent to join the 1st Regiment. Colonel Stagler don't approve of educated men. Says it was educated men that got Krieg bombed to shit in the first place. The colonel says that all a man needs to do is fight and die. That is the Krieg way. An unnamed Krieg Corps soldier explaining his illiteracy. It's always the ending.
The ending is the best, explaining his illiteracy.
Hey, you don't need to know anything besides shoot, run, and shovel.
Yeah, shoot, run, shovel, and die. That's
So, moving on as we're starting to, as we've already talked quite a bit about Krieg and their backstory, I do want to talk a little bit about the tabletop, just slightly.
Okay.
So as I know you don't know much about the tabletop, but as for the Krieg, they're not very well represented. Unfortunately, Games Workshop and all of their wisdom decided to basically discontinue a lot of their kits, which is rather unfortunate because they're a very popular army. They have a couple interesting abilities. One of my more favorite ones is the Cult of Sacrifice, which is whenever they die, they have a 50% chance to shoot you anyway. Which is kind of fun, you know. It's kind of a cool idea. It's not
like a great thing, you know.
It's not great, but it's something.
Yeah.
As for the models, you can buy themselves. So if you wanted to get, so games are 2,000 points, right?
Sure.
Good old 2,000 points. And if you wanted to do a nice bit of guardsmen, you wanted to run a wonderful bit
ต้องใช้โล่หรือเปล่าวะ
Canadian
จำไม่ได้ละ
guardsmen, and you wanted to grab 10 whole guardsmen, it would cost you $36. Now, 10 guardsmen is about 50 points, give or take if you put some good weapons on them. And 50 points of 2,000 is, 1/40th of a full army. So for $36, you get 1/40th of an army. Kriegsmen, however, the Death Corps of Krieg infantry squad on the Games Workshop site, well, it's the Forge World site, is $72 for 10 of them. So if you wanted 500 points of guardsmen, it would drive you to $720 without tax and without shipping.
Oh boy, that's
It
a
is.
lot. That is a fair chunk of change.
It is horse shit, and it gets worse.
It gets worse.
It gets worse. So that was $72. You can also get a command squad HQ, which is like a special group of 5 commanders, and it's only 5 models, not 10. That costs you $55 for half the models. And let's not forget the engineers that cost you $42 for 5 models. It is...
Boy,
It is horse shit.
that's crazy. So like, why is there a reason why they stopped making these and why they're not in production? Because it sounds like they should be a very popular faction.
Well, it's like, the scorpion and the frog tail?
No, I know. Nope, I do not. I can't say I do.
Okay, so the scorpion and the frog is just an old, little metaphor, or more of a tail. The concept is that the frog is carrying a scorpion across the way to the river, and the frog's like, no fucking way I'm gonna do that. The scorpion's like, why the hell would I sting you? If we're both in the water, we'll both die. And halfway through the water, the scorpion stings him anyway. And he's like, why'd you do that? We're both gonna die now. And it's like, well, it's a scorpion. It's in his nature. It's in GW's nature to do shit that doesn't make sense.
I thought this was taking a much more profound intellectual route.
No, it's not. They don't. Yes, you're correct. It's a very popular faction, and people love them. They didn't. they didn't necessarily discontinue like the actual purchasable kits. They got rid of the rules in the game, so I guess you could still field them, but their rules are gone. And if I was a man who does not want to be super negative, I'd argue that it's because they wanted to streamline the rules more, because instead back in the day they were kind of their own faction and they couldn't use a lot of the regular guard stuff. Now they can, but now they have less unique units. If I was hopefully thinking, or like thinking in a more hopeful way, I would argue that they're going to get some nice new stuff on the main website and be an actual thing in the new codex.
ได้
That's not going to happen because Scorpion and Frog, but either way, I have no idea. So, DK, today that was the Death Core of Krieg. Definitely a big topic for the first podcast. A very popular one. Thoughts, impressions?
I can't believe I'd never heard of these. I struggle to say people. I can't believe I've never heard of them.
That's okay. It's acceptable.
They're so depressing, and their history and their heresy and the fervorous use of nukes to what should have destroyed a planet and all of its population suddenly spawns a 500-year war, and they still exist, and they still go back, and they're still crazy. Warhammer's wild, dude.
Colonel Yurdi is a man of many talents. Colonel Yurdi's dead, by the way. He died. Yeah, it's through the Civil War. You know, at some point he passed, but you know,
Yurdi Purgy, never forget.
The Yurdi Purgy. He's a nuts man. So anyway, with that being said, to all the viewers out there, thank you so much for joining us on the first ever Adeptus Ridiculous podcast. I'd say we certainly had a fantastic time. Of course, as time goes on, we'll clean it up a little bit. We'll make some adjustments. Really kind of hone this whole podcast to being as sharp as a Kriegsman shovel. That being said, please rate us high if you liked it, whether that is on YouTube or on the various podcasting services you are currently listening to. Tell a friend, especially a friend if they're a little bit more interested into Warhammer, but they never quite got too into it. There's a good chance they might be able to learn a little something from here. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at the Adeptus Ridiculous name, also known as @Ridiculous at the @. Besides that, my name has been Bricky. You can find me on Bricky in pretty much everywhere. It's pretty much Bricky on everything at this point. DK, you want to tell the people where they can find you?
Sure. DK Diamantes, you can find me everywhere under that name, except Instagram, because I had to do real DK Diamantes because someone stole it and used my likeness. But yeah, DK Diamantes pretty much everywhere. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter.
And of course, we got to shout out good old Cephalon Shy, or Quiet Shy, for bringing this all together. This was her idea and her baby. And overall, we're all really happy that we can be a part of it. So thank you again, and we will see you very soon. Welcome everybody to another bonus episode of Adeptus Ridiculous. I today am your host, Ricky. Joined with me is my co-host today, of course, DK, because we're doing a little bit of a switcheroo. But before we get too into that, I do need to give a shout out to all of our fantastic patrons at Adeptus Ridiculous on Patreon. All of you and your consistent and pretty insane.
มันต้องอันนี้ดิ
Hey everyone, before this episode gets started, we did open a Patreon over at patreon.com/AdeptusRidiculous. Initially, we opened it to help pay for the website and podcast hosting, but if you do decide to support us, there are a lot of really awesome benefits as well. Things like bloopers and outtakes, Discord access, behind-the-scenes footage, monthly digital art, and some really awesome stretch goals as well. At $100, we'll be able to cover all of our fees for website and podcast hosting. At $1,000, instead of bi-weekly episodes, we can do weekly episodes episodes, and at $3,000 we can start expanding our team, starting with the researcher to increase both the quality and quantity of our episodes. Also, fear not, the episodes will remain free, so even if you don't support us on Patreon, which we hope you do, you can still enjoy all the Adeptus Ridiculous podcasts.
เย้ย พลังโจมตี พลังชีวิต
Welcome everyone to the second episode of the Adeptus Ridiculous. My name is DK Diamantes. I know basically nothing about Warhammer lore. I know bits and pieces. I know that the Emperor is a corpse emperor. I know that Magnus did nothing wrong, but aside from that, I'm going to need a lot of help from lifelong fan Bricky. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at @adridiculous, and be sure to check out the website adeptusridiculous.com to stay in tune when we go live and when these get uploaded. Bricky, you told me this was one of the most important events in Warhammer. Initially, I thought that you were going to be talking to me about the Horus Heresy, because that's all anyone ever talks about. When they're like, oh, dude, when you get into Warhammer, you need to start with the Horus Heresy. That's it. Do that. What's the most important event that is not the Horus Heresy?
Well, I'd argue that. Oh yeah. Also, hi, I'm Bricky. You know, DK, you didn't shoot out your socials. Which want to be like, I'm DK on DK this, that, and the other thing. Because I'm Bricky on pretty much every social media platform there is.
Listen, man, I did the intro. I'll chill later. It's fine.
All right. I like chilling.
I'm stoked about this important event.
I do wonder, at what point do you have to say that you no longer know nothing about Warhammer? Like, how many episodes in do we have to reach before we're like, you know, I know a little bit about Warhammer now?
I feel like there is so much Warhammer stuff out there that it's gonna take like 100 episodes before I'm like, yeah, I kind of know it.
There's a lot. There's a lot. But this topic, yes, a lot of people do think that the Horus Heresy is #1, a big bad event, and it probably is the one you should look at if you're very new right into the whole universe. However, to say that it's the most important event in the universe would probably be wrong. Today we are talking about the Necrons and the war in heaven, most primarily, and a little bit of our big bad boy called the Silent King, because he's a very important character and one of my favorites, and I do want to get on him a little bit after we discuss the Necrons themselves, because while a lot of people see the Necrons as just one of the many Xenos races, like the Tyranids or the Eldar, they are probably one of, if not the most important race in the entire universe.
Oh. So I remember last episode you said you wanted to talk about the Silent King, and I was like, man, I know the Silent King is a Necron, so surely we got to get a little backstory on the Necrons, what they are, because the only thing I know about the Silent King is I said this last time, but he rides a throne and it's powered by like an god or something.
He rides a pimp throne and he's got an enslaved god as a battery. It is fantastic. Actually, I do have a little excerpt from the codex in which I'm currently holding that I did want to read at one point, but we can get into that a little bit later because there is a lot to cover in this particular part of the Warhammer universe. I'm curious when I should get going because this is like me opening up like a 300-page novel.
Oh boy, that's boy, that's a long history of the Necrons.
It's a lot. They have a lot going on. And the Necron tier. We're talking about the Necron tier.
Oh.
Imagine Necron with a TYR at the end. Necron tier.
Oh, I thought we were talking like a tier list, like TIER, there's tiers of Necrons. I was like, that's what you,
that's genius. I want to get a Trays in the Infinite man-spreading tier list. The top 20 Trays in the Infinite man-spread photoshops.
Tier list.
This is genius. Shy, get on this.
Yeah, tweet that out immediately. Post haste as soon as this goes up. We need to get a tier list.
Oh my god. Okay.
But I'm excited about this because like as far as minis go, with the few that I've painted, I know that like Necrons are so popular and they're so cool, and I'm stoked to finally learn about them and why everybody loves them so much.
Yeah, I mean, they recently got a huge update, which is why they're very popular right now. They got a brand new codex just a few months ago. They got a whole bunch of new models. They kind of had the sisters treatment, where they got a nice big range refresh. And especially now, they're kind of the main villains of this new chapter of the lore. That in the Pariah Nexus and all, the Indomitus Crusade is a big part of it. So they're kind of like the new main baddie in this current era of Warhammer. So with that being said, I think it is good to know exactly kind of where they came from, and so you can kind of have a little bit more of a conscious idea of what exactly happened to both their race. Why are they robots? Why are they robot skeletons? And what's like why they have this Egyptian? Well, there's no real reason for the Egyptian thing besides, but it's why all those things.
It's the only reason you need. It looks
I mean, it does look really cool. It's a whole bunch of it's undead Egyptian robot skeletons. It's fantastic. And actually, before we do get into it, I do want to mention some of the old Necron lore. GW has this thing where they have lore for lots of different races, but it's always the lore as written by X or Y other faction. So a lot of times they can say the records were incorrect. It's actually this, and they want to retcon something. Back in the day, the Necrons were basically just Terminator ripoffs. So much so that their special ability to come back from life, known as reanimation protocols, was called "Will Be Back." It was super on the nose.
I mean, that's very on the nose. That's like cow level on the nose.
It is seriously obvious. And at the time, they were just unthinking, unfeeling robots that wanted to kill all life. And that was kind of their lore. They don't know where they came from. They didn't know what's going on. It was just, yeah, they want to kill everything. But now they've been fleshed out. Now they have different kinds of dynasties, similar to how Space Marines have chapters, and they have a whole thing. So, way back in the day, the Necron tier were a race of flesh and blood. Millions of years ago, about 60 million years ago, maybe even longer. So way back when, Necron tier's life was ass. They had super cancer. And basically what was that they lived on a horrible planet in which a star constantly blasted their bodies with radiation. And they lived short, brittle, painful lives of radiation sickness. And like, you know, if you have you ever seen Chernobyl, the TV show, like you know how bad radiation sickness is.
Oh yeah, it's no good. That's
no, it's absolutely horrible way to die. And so that was their life, was short, like 20 to 40 year lifespan, give or take, it was assumed, because of just how terrible living on this planet was, and to the point where creating like tombs and stuff just for the dead to only occasionally house the living was how they lived. And so for a while there was another race around there, and that race was called the Old Ones, which was what the Eldar called them. And the Old Ones were these kind of like, I think kind of like reptile things. If you played any StarCraft, they're like the Xel'Naga, or if you played any Halo, they're like the Forerunners, I suppose.
Okay.
Big, extremely advanced being with a huge knowledge of space travel and astrology. Astronomy. That one.
Like Aquarius. And
they were Geminis.
Mercury in retrograde. And,
they were a bunch of Cancers. At least the Necron tier were. So the Old Ones, they were practically like nigh immortal. They were living the best lives that they could. And the Necrons, or the Necron tier, ended up going out and finding these Old Ones because they eventually developed space travel to get away from their horrible planet. But
why wouldn't you? I mean,
yeah.
Jesus. Sounds like worse than the Creed planet we were talking about last time.
Yes, Creed planet was terrible.
Yeah, it sounds worse. Like 20 years, and you just like. And it's like, God, how do they even come up with space travel? You only have 20 years. How do you? Jesus.
Very slowly. So their space travel was very similar to how our space travel would be in modern day. They would have to go into like stasis pods and it'd take like forever to reach a new area. As for that, they eventually came into contact with said old ones, and the old ones were living, you know, their best lives, and the Necrons were like, damn, old ones, you guys teach us how to live that life and how to be immortal. The old ones were like, piss off. So naturally, you have this horribly terrible, radiation-stricken Necron tier race looking at these 9 like almost godlike beings, and then just this festing this deep dark nature of these old ones. And so these Necrons, with their short lifespans, tended to fight each other because all the different they like dynasties. They tended to kind of fight each other a little bit. So eventually, after enough quarrels, they came together under one flag and went out to them and they said, "Fuck you, old ones," and they started a war with them. Can you? I'll give you another ABC thing. A.
Oh boy.
A. They won. B. They lost. C. Both of them died.
I can't imagine them winning. I mean, they're this weak race of super cancer-inflicted beings, and you're gonna go up against a bunch of immortals living their best life that are super advanced. There's no way they win. They lose.
They absolutely get bodied. So much so that they are shoved into that same corner of the galaxy with their horrible super cancer sun, and they are basically trapped there, and the old ones consider them no more than a slight nuisance. And so they lose hard. Now, the Necron tier discovered a different race. So way back when the galaxy was first formed, you know, essence of creation, created the warp, you know, just like the dawn of life, right? There were these other beings known as the Catan. The Catan are these star gods. They're basically beings of non-energy, so to speak, but they kind of consume energy from stars. They're not really like visible. They're kind of in between. They're not like, they don't necessarily live in the warp, but they're kind of this weird like in between. It's like an invisible force. Imagine like an alien that you can only see in like infrared or something like that. Kind of weird. So these Catan in particular were just kind of chilling around, and eventually the Necrons discovered these Catan, and naturally after this horrible war with the old ones and how they got absolutely dumpstered, they kind of wanted to find a way to commune with these Catan. Now, no one really knows how they were able to do it, but their main theory was the concept that since the Catan were these kind of immaterial gods, they need a physical material shell. So what they did was they created out of that kind of living metal, they have this thing called living metal, it's kind of like metal that regrows itself, and they created these like statues and these sort of deities of said metal, and these deities had said Catan kind of like take over the statue. So it's almost like the essence of the star god entered the statue and gave them a physical form. And so now these star gods had their own, I wouldn't say flesh and blood, but they had this like necrodermis of a body, and they could commune with the Necrons. Naturally, the Catan wanted to get the most they could out of the Necron tier. The Necron tier naturally wanted to form an alliance with these star gods. So there are a main thing called the Triarch. The Triarch is the real full-on leadership of the Necrons. And the Triarch, as the name sounds, Tri is made of 3 people. 2 of these lower-tier pharaons, and because the Necrons kind of had no nobility system, they had like lords and overlords, and they had like a royal court and stuff like that. And then the final one was the Silent King. Now this guy was known as the Silent King because he wouldn't actually address the populace himself. He would address them through the other 2 parts of the Triarch, the pharaohs. And if you actually look at the Silent King's model, you've got these like 2 little dudes next to him, and that's the other 2 guys, the current one. And so what happened was that the Catan, now in their new physical bodies, normally they hunger for stars, right? But now they hunger for like more of the material realm. A satiation of this kind of like this new gluttonous feeling where they really want to consume either like different materials or particularly souls of people.
Okay.
So, what happened is there was a Catan known as the Deceiver. Now, he's not the nicest of guys.
Really? His name's the Deceiver. He's not a nice guy?
No, not a whole lot. Wow. So what happened was that the Deceiver came up to the Silent King. The Silent King's name is Zarek, by the way. And then he went to Zarek and he petitioned him. And he said the Catan, way back when, had a war with the Old Ones as well. And they lost the war. The Catan are super bitter about this, just like the Necrons hate the Old Ones. And because of this, they had a burning passion of vengeance against those terrible Old Ones. So they said
โอ
this,
เควันนี้
go
น่าจะ
ahead
พอแค่นี้ก่อนแหละ
and align with us, and your entire population will become
โอเคเรียบร้อยโอเคฮะสำหรับใครที่ดูมาจนถึงตอนนี้นี่ก็อย่าลืมฝากกดไลค์ Subscribe แล้วก็แชร์ด้วยนะฮะแล้วก็อย่าลืมกดกระดิ่งกันนะไว้ด้วยล่ะเพราะบางทีอาจจะมีแบบอยู่อัพอาจจะมาไลฟ์เฉยๆไปอย่างนั้นก็อาจจะมีอยู่บางครั้งนะโอเคครับสำหรับวันนี้ผมฟิออสเกมเมอร์ก็ขอลาไปก่อนละสวัสดีครับ